A bombshell report from Punchbowl News has sent shockwaves through the business and political world, revealing that Amazon is attempting to sidestep the blame for rising prices caused by President Trump's latest tariffs. What appeared at first to be a simple corporate decision quickly erupted into a full-blown political crisis. Amazon's plan to openly show how the tariffs were inflating prices, raising Chinese imports by an eye-watering 145% and other goods by 10%, was a direct challenge to the government and ignited a firestorm. This is a hostile, politically motivated action by Amazon, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt declared angrily shortly after speaking with President Trump that morning. What followed was a political earthquake. In early 2025, Amazon, long known for its quiet dominance, sparked a major controversy when Punchbowl News leaked the company's plan in April. The White House immediately struck back with full force, denouncing Amazon's attempt at transparency as a deliberate political move designed to undermine the president. Trump himself personally called Jeff Bezos, his anger evident in the heated conversation, while Leavitt blasted the idea as an attack on the administration. Despite Amazon's attempt to retract the plan, the damage was already done. This was no longer just a corporate decision about price adjustments. It had evolved into a dangerous game of power, politics, and control over global trade. Amazon, a global titan of e-commerce, was now on the front lines of a political battle that no one saw coming. Inside Amazon's global headquarters in Seattle, a chilling silence took over. The once bustling offices, full of strategic meetings and decision-making, grew eerily still. The elevators, a symbol of Amazon's constant motion and success, came to a halt. Crucial meetings were cancelled. Strategy sessions disappeared from calendars. June loomed without a single follow-up meeting scheduled. It was clear that Amazon was reeling, caught in the undertow of a political and business crisis far bigger than anyone had expected. In secret, Amazon activated Project Silver Compass, an emergency operation to relocate its entire global operations outside the United States. This wasn't a mere office move or small adjustment. It was an urgent and massive shift. The reason was simple but deeply alarming. Tariffs were now threatening over $13 billion in Amazon's profits over just 3 years. But the real blow came when the U.S. government revoked the de minimis rule, a policy that had allowed Amazon to bring in low-value goods duty-free. Without this rule, Amazon's carefully designed global supply chain was on the brink of collapse. The company found itself cornered, unable to escape the consequences of a trade war it had no power to influence. With no other option, Amazon turned its eyes to the world beyond U.S. borders. The search for a new headquarters began in earnest. The short list of possible locations was narrowed down to 4 countries: Singapore, Ireland, Canada, and the United Arab Emirates. Each location offered strategic advantages. Singapore promised speed and efficiency. Ireland boasted a business-friendly environment with low taxes. Canada offered strong cultural and trade ties, and the UAE extended the most attractive offer. The Emiratis provided a stunning package: a 10-year tax break, a custom logistics district in Dubai, a sovereign data treaty, and even relocation support for up to 40,000 employees and their families. While U.S. policymakers remained embroiled in the complexities of trade wars and tariffs, Amazon was quietly making plans to leave the country altogether. Behind closed doors, secret negotiations with foreign governments began, while tensions in Washington mounted. This wasn't just a simple business decision. It was a symbolic moment in the ongoing struggle over the future of U.S. economic policy. Amazon, once the shining star of American entrepreneurship, was now preparing to leave its home country and crown another nation as the center of its empire. In Washington, the political temperature continued to rise. Reports began circulating that Amazon had tested a new model to show the full cost of tariffs on its products, in an effort to reveal to consumers how much these policies were driving up prices. The White House reacted swiftly and harshly, calling it a politically motivated stunt. Some members of Congress even discussed launching antitrust investigations into Amazon's actions. The pressure was mounting on all sides. Then, on May 6, 2025, Amazon made its final shocking announcement. It would be relocating its global headquarters outside the United States. This wasn't a simple expansion or the opening of a new office. No, Amazon was moving its entire operations, including logistics, finance, and leadership, out of the U.S. and into a foreign country. The company was abandoning its home base, signaling a monumental shift in how multinational corporations were responding to rising trade tensions, political uncertainty, and shifting economic landscapes. This decision wasn't just about avoiding tariffs. It was a message to the world. Amazon, once the epitome of American innovation, was prepared to leave the U.S. behind in search of better opportunities elsewhere. The company's move wasn't just a response to economic pressures. It was a symbol of the shifting balance of power between corporations and governments. Amazon had made its choice. It would no longer be tied to a single nation. Its future lay in global markets, free from the constraints of U.S. politics. For Amazon, this wasn't just a retreat, it was a bold, calculated move into the future. The business world would never be the same again. The stakes were higher than ever. And Amazon was ready to lead the charge into a new era. The announcement wasn't just a business maneuver. It was a seismic shift, an urgent, calculated move to maintain global competitiveness in a world where the cost of doing business was spiraling out of control. For policymakers, the news underscored a far graver reality. The fragile balance between national economic strategy and the harsh, unrelenting demands of a globally integrated marketplace. And the reaction was immediate. Like a shockwave, the news rippled through Seattle, crashing into Amazon's stock with a sudden drop of 5%. For a moment, the markets froze, gripped by uncertainty. But then, like the calm after a storm, the stock rebounded. Investors recalculated, shifting focus to the potential windfall from tax cuts and tariff-free operations abroad. It seemed like a win. But on the ground in Seattle, the fallout was nothing short of catastrophic. The city's housing market, once inflated by Amazon's tech-driven boom, began to falter. Home prices that had reached dizzying heights plummeted, and the pulse of the local economy, once powered by the Amazon workforce, began to slow. Small businesses, dependent on the steady stream of employees for survival, watched their revenue evaporate. And Seattle, once the shining example of tech-driven urban growth, suddenly seemed on the brink of collapse. The city's tax base crumbled beneath the weight of Amazon's exodus, threatening to starve the very public services and infrastructure projects that had once made it a thriving metropolis. Thousands of Amazon employees now faced a harrowing choice: relocate under expedited terms, seek employment elsewhere, or remain in limbo, waiting for the answers they feared might never come. Caught completely off guard, city officials scrambled. Emergency incentives were thrown together. Job transition programs were hastily constructed, and desperate talks for new partnerships began. But none of it could keep pace with the accelerating departure. Amazon's withdrawal was not just a shift, it was a reckoning. For Seattle, this was no ordinary business decision. It was a turning point, a brutal reminder of the risks of overdependence on a single corporate giant. And as Seattle's fortunes waned, Amazon's global transition was already in full force. In the Gulf, new infrastructure was springing up overnight. Abu Dhabi became the new heart of Amazon's cloud operations. Its data centers built to ensure compliance with sovereign data laws. Fulfillment centers in Bahrain and Oman, equipped with cutting-edge automation and solar power, marked the company's aggressive pivot towards sustainability and technological advancement. Meanwhile, Amazon's engineers were retrained in everything from Islamic finance to data localization, adapting to a rapidly changing cultural and regulatory landscape. And back at headquarters, a total overhaul of the company's global supply chain was already underway. U.S. ports, once the lifeblood of Amazon's distribution network, were now secondary. The company was building a faster, more flexible network across Asia, the Middle East, and Europe, integrating blockchain, AI, and robotics into its operations to stay ahead of the curve. But this wasn't just a logistics overhaul, it was a global power play. Amazon was no longer just moving goods. It was restructuring its entire supply ecosystem to weather the volatility of geopolitics, and to operate beyond the confines of traditional borders. Its move redefined the future of business, setting a dangerous precedent. And the world took notice. Within weeks, other corporate giants began recalibrating their strategies. Apple, quietly ramping up its lobbying efforts, sought tariff exemptions. Tesla, already expanding in Indonesia, was now applying for preferential tax treatment. Even Walmart, once the stalwart of American retail, began reevaluating its entire global sourcing network. A message had been sent, not in words but in actions. Relocation was no longer a theory, it was a reality. If Amazon could leave, so could anyone. Back in the US, the political response was swift but fragmented. Lawmakers demanded investigations. Consumer advocacy groups decried what they called an offshore tax escape. Labor unions accused Amazon of abandoning American workers. But beneath the surface of this outrage, a more insidious question began to take root. What does it mean to be an American company in 2025? In an era where supply chains are more important than borders, where tariffs outweigh treaties, the very concept of corporate identity was being redefined. Amazon's departure wasn't just an isolated event, it was a harbinger of a seismic shift in global business. A shift that, ironically, began as an effort to protect American industry from foreign competition. Instead of revitalizing domestic production, the policies intended to safeguard American interests had set in motion the largest corporate exodus in modern history, with Amazon leading the way. As Washington continued to debate the metrics of trade, cities like Dubai, Dublin, and Singapore quietly positioned themselves as the new epicenters of global innovation. These cities were not just hosting Amazon's future, they were hosting the future of multinational enterprise. And what was left behind in the wake of Amazon's departure? Not stronger factories, not a booming export market, but vacant headquarters, an eroding tax base, and a brain drain of elite talent. Amazon's move wasn't just a corporate decision. It was the reordering of the global economic order. It was a warning shot. The world had changed, and it was unclear if America could keep up. So we ask you, was Amazon justified in leaving? Should U.S. policy shift before others follow? Can America still lead in a world where capital no longer respects borders? These are the questions that will define the future. Subscribe for more, and don't miss our next report on where Tesla, Apple, and Walmart might be heading next.